Donald Trump's fired up and can't wait to go after more people. And obviously his number one target is Robert Mueller, the special counsel investigating him. So recently he had a bunch of maniacal tweets as usual. And then I will go to Republican reaction and we'll see if they're ever going to hold him accountable. He tweeted recently, spent very little time with Andrew McCabe, but he never took notes when he was with me. I don't believe he made memos except to help his own agenda, probably at a later date. Same with lying James Comey. Can we call them fake memos? He thinks that's clever, which always amuses me. Fake news is not clever, and fake news is actually what got you into office. Your side used it. Fake memos is also not clever. Now, McCabe was fired just a little over a day before he was set to retire and get his pension. And a lot of people thought that that was malicious. It is not malicious in terms of, I'll show you. It is actually done with a purpose. The purpose is, so it's not gratuitous, I should say. It is malicious with intent. And the purpose is McCabe might testify against Donald Trump with the extemporaneous notes that he took of their meetings. If he backs up what James Comey said, that could bolster the obstruction of justice charge against Donald Trump. So he has Sessions fire him and pretend that it's for lying under oath so that he could hurt his credibility when McCabe, the deputy director for the FBI, testifies against Trump. So this is all to cover his ass. It is to do damage control, and it is for the specific purpose of obstruction of justice. Anyone who can't see that is purposely blind. You think that a day before he's set to retire, he's gonna leave anyway, that all of a sudden that these guys were worried about lying. Sessions lied under oath about his contacts with the Russians. And McCabe's underlying issue was that he did a leak, but it was a leak to make sure that the Clinton Foundation was investigated more, not less. So the Trump administration is really angry at McCabe for investigating Hillary Clinton more? Who in their right mind could believe such nonsense? So obviously a man not in his right mind is Donald Trump, and he keeps on tweeting. He says, why does the Mueller team have 13 hardened Democrats, some big crooked Hillary supporters, and 0 Republicans? Another Dem recently added, does anyone think this is fair? And yet there is no collusion. The people that concluded that there was no collusion were Republicans in the House, and including Devin Nunes, who was part of the transition team for Donald Trump. So his own team decided there was no collusion. No investigator has ever concluded that. Is it true that there's 13 hardened Democrats and no Republicans on the special counsel team? Of course, not remotely true. In fact, there was an analysis done by the press. They're almost all Republicans, including Mueller, who's a Republican. Comey was a Republican. The current head of the FBI, a Republican. McCabe, by the way, by all indications, even though his wife ran as a Democrat, McCabe was a Republican. As usual, another outrageous, preposterous lie by our president, who appears to be a pathological liar. And then he puts out this tweet a little bit later, a total witch hunt with massive conflicts of interest, with no context. Imagine if Obama had done that about the Benghazi hearings. They would have said he lost his mind. What kind of a maniac who's president of the United States does a random weird tweet attacking everyone, and everything he says is wrong? So, all right, now, that isn't the question. We already know what kind of a maniac Trump is. The question is, are the Republicans going to do anything about it if Trump actually goes one last step and fires Mueller? Well, his lawyer, Dowd, had suggested that he might do that. He had to walk it back because it was not well received. But even Trey Gowdy, who's a Republican in the House, now a little bit freer to speak his actual mind, because he's not running for re-election, so he's not tethered to the donors. So he says, if you have an innocent client, Mr. Dowd, act like it. And people who are innocent are not looking to fire the special counsel. And so I'm glad that that Gowdy pointed that out. And I've been pointing that out. Does anyone think that Trump is acting like an innocent person? Wildly attacking anyone who might testify against him and firing them, threatening to fire everyone who is currently investigating him. He has every trapping of a massively guilty person. In fact, Gowdy continues and says that he hopes that Mueller doesn't get fired because he's doing important work. That's good to know. Then you go to Marco Rubio. He was asked about it. He said, I don't like the way that it happened, referring to the McCabe firing. He should have been allowed to finish through the weekend. He went on to say he thinks that it's a bad idea to be, quote, smearing everybody within law enforcement agencies like the FBI. That is definitely true. Gee, I wonder why Donald Trump is smearing law enforcement. You might want to smear law enforcement if law enforcement is investigating you and they're right. Okay, then Mano Raju from CNN caught up with Orrin Hatch. And here's his tweet about that. Orrin Hatch told me he does not support legislation to protect the special counsel, but says this: firing Mueller would be, quote, the stupidest thing Trump could do. We'll see if that's true because it might yet happen, but it's good to see Orrin Hatch saying that on the record. He went on to say, quote, my conversations with the White House have led me to believe legislation is not necessary at this point because I do not believe the president would take such a foolish action. He apparently has never met the president. Of course he would take a foolish action like that because you guys would probably not follow through on your threat. We'll get to that in a second because I want to ask you guys about that in a poll. But why don't you just pass the legislation? Why don't you just pass a legislation saying you cannot fire the special counsel? You could do it tomorrow, but they won't. John Cornyn also says it's not necessary, but he says the consequences of firing Mueller would be, quote, so overwhelming. Now, I'm not sure that I believe him, but it is good to see all these Republicans on the record saying, do not fire Mueller. In fact, let's go to Judge Napolitano. Now, he's not sitting in Congress, but he's a Fox News analyst, and the goofball that's our president actually once considered him for the Supreme Court. I'm glad he didn't go in that direction, but I'm also glad to see that Napolitano is being principled here. Listen.
Do you think the firing was vindictive and reckless?
I do.
How come?
Because Andrew McCabe is more likely than not to be a witness against the Attorney General's boss, the President of the United States. I think that firing him in that environment could very well be interpreted as an effort to diminish his effectiveness as a witness. What's that called? Obstruction of justice.
Bingo, that's exactly right. Man, this issue is making for some really strange bedfellows. Ralph Peters today quit Fox News, huge warmonger, but he's saying, look, they're obviously covering up for Trump, and weirdly, maniacally, incorrectly so. And Napolitano saying, look, it's obvious obstruction of justice. On Fox News saying it. Now let's go to Lindsey Graham. He's a Republican senator from South Carolina.
Well, as I said before, if he tried to do that, that would be the beginning of the end of his presidency because we're a rule of law nation. But when it comes to Mr. Mueller, he is following the evidence where it takes him. And I think it's very important he be allowed to do his job without interference. And there are many Republicans who share my view.
So those are strong words, but then later he was asked, yeah, but do you mean impeachment? And he said, yes, impeachment would be an option if he were to fire Mueller. But that is apparently, according to him, for now, what he said was the implication. Now let's go to Charlie Dent. He's another retiring congressman who's a Republican in the House.
And if he's relieved, I'll tell you, that would be the equivalent of a Saturday Night Massacre, just like when Archibald Cox was fired during the Nixon days.
Lindsey Graham says it would be the end of the presidency. Do you think it would be that grave?
Well, I don't know if it'd be the end of the presidency, but boy, but it would set off I just think it would be catastrophic on many levels. So politically, it would just bring Washington to a standstill. That's what would be the whole issue. I mean, we would be fighting over how do we let the investigation proceed. Any other business would not be able to get done. So in many respects, it would throw us into a complete and utter stalemate. And, and Lindsey Graham may be right, and maybe it does end the presidency.
Look, I'm heartened to hear Republicans drawing a red line, if you will, on that issue, and I think those are good, strong comments by Charlie Dent, and he should get credit for it. But how many retiring congressmen are there? How many principled Republicans are there in the country? I mean, if they were so principled, why don't they just pass the law right now saying you can't fire the special counsel? It's easy. And a lot of times, even Lindsey Graham saying, well, you shouldn't fire him without a cause. Well, of course he's gonna pretend to have cause. He's gonna say, oh, conflicts of interest, and he was working with McCabe and Comey, and they were pro-Hillary, or maybe they were anti-Hillary in the last preposterous firing. It doesn't matter, they're gonna invent an excuse. And so they're not passing the law. By the way, of course, as usual with the corporate Democrats, get a load of this. Reported by HuffPost, the views of Senator Dianne Feinstein, so-called Democrat of California, I added the so-called part, lined up with those of the Republicans on Monday. She told reporters that she didn't think special prosecutions protections were necessary since firing Mueller was so obviously a bad move. Do you live on this planet, Senator Feinstein? When has an obviously bad move stopped Donald Trump? He's done a million obviously bad moves. I mean, they keep thinking that he's an honest actor. Are you insane? So when Feinstein was reminded that there's a progressive who's running a primary against her, she then backpedaled and was like, oh yeah, I mean, sure, I guess so. I forgot I was supposed to be pretending to hold power accountable and pretending to do resistance. But her initial instinct was, yes, of course, we don't need to pass any laws protecting the special counsel. Why would Donald Trump ever do something that was a bad move? Okay, side note, vote for Allison Harsin against Dianne Feinstein. She's not gonna do light resistance. She's not gonna assume that Donald Trump has best intentions, which is maniacal. But now, one last video for you guys. This one's Rick Tyler, he's a Republican consultant. He has a different take on what the Republicans will do, watch.
Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to go out on a limb.
Do it.
The president has calculated now, and I think it's true to Phil Rucker's point, is the reaction from the Republicans. He is going to fire Robert Mueller.
Woo, you heard it.
And you know what's going to happen? Nothing. That's what's going to happen. There will be no response from the Republican leadership, from the Congress. We got a single line sentence from the Speaker of the House. We got nothing from the leadership practically in the Senate. We got a little bit from Lindsey Graham, but it's weak soup. It's not going to happen. He's going to fire Mueller eventually, probably sooner rather than later, before he can get any further on what you just mentioned, money laundering or other tangential issues.
Ay, Dios mío. Wow. Wow, it is not even 9:30 on a Monday morning, and Rick Tyler just knocked my socks off. I wasn't ready for that.
Mainstream media drives me crazy. And she's actually one of the best out there. Stephanie Ruhle actually does some good interviews where she holds people accountable, but you're really shocked by that? I look at people in Washington and I think, when did they get detached from the rest of the planet? Donald Trump, well, could he really fire Mueller? Of course he can fire Mueller. He just fired McCabe. He fired Comey and admitted on national TV that he fired him because of the Russian investigation. Why would you be surprised by that? And the Republicans might not have principles and they might back him anyway? Of course. So look, it's still an open question, and I am deeply curious to see what the Republicans are going to do here. And I want to ask you guys in a poll. It's tytnetwork.com/accountability. What will the Republicans do if Trump fires Robert Mueller? A, nothing. B, vote for impeachment. C, hold him accountable by other means. But I have to be honest with you, I don't know what the other means would be. So what are they going to do? You've been a naughty boy? What are they going to do? Put in a new special counsel? Congress can't even do that. You need the Justice Department to do that. It's his Justice Department. So they've never clarified how they would hold him accountable if it is an impeachment. Do you really think that the Republicans en masse are going to somehow have principles? You might have a couple of outliers who go, well, I'm retiring anyway. But remember that there's one, the Republicans, they don't care about principles. The fact that that's surprising to people on television or the people in Washington is unreal to me. Right? They're not honest actors. The second part is, what do Republicans do? They follow orders of the donors. The donors, so far, are thrilled with Donald Trump. He just gave them trillions, not billions, trillions of dollars in tax cuts. Now, if he does things that destabilize the market, then you might have a different vote. And that's real and that's possible. But for the moment being, the marching orders that the Republicans will get is shut up and get back in line. If Trump fired him, I'm sure he had a very good reason. And Pravda, I mean Fox News, will come on air and tell you, oh yeah. It was actually Mueller who had no principles. He had conflict of interest and he was the this and the lie and the leaks and the this and that. And they'll invent 1,000 different lies about the special counsel and they'll move on with their lives. How could that possibly be shocking? Right? Do I have it at above 50%? Definitely above 50%. I'm not saying it's written in stone, and it might again have to do with what Trump does in the meanwhile and how the donors feel about that. But for people to be surprised about that is preposterous. Yes, he can easily fire Mueller at any moment, and yes, the Republicans might not do a goddamn thing about it. If you want to get the whole Young Turks show every single day, become a member, tytnetwork.com/join. And once you do, you'll be saying,
you know, I'm like a smart person.
Or you might say,
I think it's weird.
Or you might say,
oops.
No, that won't be that one. It won't be that one. It'll be great, trust me. tytnetwork.com/join.